Hi, I am Sashwati Sarkar and you're watching The Times of India. Today, we are diving into some of the most urgent and unfiltered questions Indian students are asking. Is studying in the US still worth it in the Trump 2 regime? Are students being judged beyond academics? And how risky is it to invest lakhs into a US degree in the current scenario? To help us unravel this and more, I am joined by Meaghan Blight, president of Wesleyan College, USA, a leading voice in women's liberal arts education with deep insight into the global student experience. Welcome to the show, Meaghan. Thanks a lot for joining in. So, if you had a 17-year-old student from Mumbai asking you, should I still go to the US for studying, what would be your honest and no spin answer in 2025, given the geopolitical tensions and all of that? Whatever is happening.
That's why I'm here. That's why I came in, was to come and tell parents and students it's still okay. It's still okay to come to the US. There's a lot of bluster, a lot of sensationalization that is happening. It's still a safe place and a warm place to study.
Right, right. And since you came here and you have been interacting with students and parents alike, what do you see them fearing the most?
Visa rejection. And if they are to get to the United States, having their visas unceremoniously removed while they're there. And what do you do in that case? That seems to be a consistent theme with parents, educators, and students.
So were you able to give them the true picture of the ground reality?
Yeah, I'm a Canadian who lives in the United States. I'm an immigrant myself who's on a visa. And so I have kind of an interesting perspective on being in the US as a college president. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of bluster that's happening. And before I came here, I consulted our college's immigration lawyer and said, what can I tell these parents? What can I tell people like yourself? And he said, you're going to get visas and it might take a little longer to get them. So start early and do your biometrics early, but they're going to get visas. And I said, what happens if a student is told that their visa is suspended or something happens? He says, it's business as usual. They are legally allowed to be in the country. We would then respond back from a legal perspective. And that's why you saw all of those visas be reinstated for the most part. He goes, now listen, if you have an international student or anybody who's not a citizen who commits a crime, the US government has the ability to then remove that person from the country, just as any country does. But he said, if this individual has a visa, is a student, and nothing has gone wrong, of course, we would respond with our own legal advice and ensure that that visa gets reinstated.
Right. So everyone is chasing STEM. Mm-hmm. And STEM is the most popular field of study in the US, yep. And I think all over the globe. Is there one underrated stream which you think Indian students must explore to increase their relevance in the global job market?
I think skill development is what's important. I think as you see a rise, of course, in the use of AI, we're going to need more people who can have human skills, right? Mm-hmm. And so the ability to communicate and lead and get people, influence people, critically examine what is true and actual information, right? And not be operating in these echo chambers. And so when you're thinking about a university or college path or program, don't fixate on exactly what the course is or what the fad is. Look at who's going to develop your skills. And I think that's where university admissions tends to get it wrong. We expect university students and applicants to be perfect, right? Have really high grades, great SAT scores, play an instrument and play a sport and be able to solve for X and do Model UN on the weekends and it's exhausting. And we need to be looking at we're there to develop a young person. You develop their voice and their confidence and those skills that are going to be able to transcend borders, intercultural competencies. And I think if you're looking at an institution who's going to do that, that's what's going to take you further. And you'll be able to navigate changes, technological changes, socioeconomic changes in a better way than just really focusing on, I've got to do computer science.
Right. So apart from STEM, if you could, mention a few other fields.
Environmental sustainability would be one. We see a huge uptick in psychology. Behavioral economics is another one that's very interesting right now that is coming up. But interdisciplinary programs we're seeing a lot of, right? Where we're taking different fields together and looking at disciplines in a different way. So these are the types of programs that I think are ones that are worth exploring.
They are supposed to pick up. So there are very many, tests like say IELTS, ACT, SAT and APs. It gets a little overwhelming for students. So which of these tests really matter? And so we're also seeing a test optional landscape in the US. Is this just PR talk, the test optional landscape, or it really helps students?
So we're a test optional institution, and you saw a lot of institutions become test optional during COVID, of course.
Right.
Now, the very, very selective Ivy League schools, they're bringing back their tests, and it's to cull the herd, right? It's at least one number that you can start to bring down that funnel. So it really depends on where you want to go. It really depends. So for me, we're test optional because I think tests and test prep privileges a certain group of students who can afford tutors and those types of things, and you can game those tests. The best predictor of year-over-year success and persistence and success in college and university is still your GPA. It still is. But if you're looking to enter into a very, very selective school, you will have to do the SAT. And the ACT.
IELTS, the AP.
Yeah, IELTS is, of course, English language. And so a lot of schools require that of certain countries. India, a lot of times, is exempt from that because your English is just as good as ours.
Oh, that's a compliment. Okay. So your university is test optional. And how is it helping? Was it test optional from the very beginning or it changed?
No, it started during COVID. We went test optional and then we realized it wasn't a great predictor, right? Over the last few years that we went test optional, we looked at persistence rate year over year. And if the students who submitted the SAT or ACT were doing any better in the classroom, they're not.
So living costs are really spiraling. I mean, living cost in the US has always been very high, and now it's high in Canada as well, with the housing shortage and all. So living costs in California and New York are, quite, out of budget for many students from India. So what are the 3 smart city choices that Indian students can make while it comes to affordable education? What would be your suggestion?
Come to Georgia. It is the last several years we have been the best state to do business in. We are open to international students. We have incredible colleges and universities, something for everybody, and very, very affordable. All of these small cities that are in and around Georgia, even Atlanta can be quite affordable, but even with an hour drive from Atlanta, where we're in Macon, Georgia, it's incredibly affordable to live and to work and to play, and a lot of big business and ability to turn your degree into a job. So think about Georgia, but yes, you're seeing a huge population move out of some of these big cities because of taxes and of course, living costs.
Yeah. Apart from Georgia, any other suggestion?
As a Canadian, I haven't spent time really looking at the socioeconomic areas. Parts of Florida, of course, can be quite affordable. You're seeing a mass exodus of Canadians out of Florida, and so I think it's going to free up some property. But I think you have to look around. But of course, I'm the most familiar with Georgia, and there's a lot of great cities there that are affordable and have great job prospects.
The question is, do you think Indian students are still welcome in the US, given the visa revocations, increased scrutiny, and tougher legal immigration rules in Trump 2 regime?
I do. I absolutely do.
Why? If you could explain.
Well, I know a lot of college presidents, right? Of course, those are my colleagues. And so these are safe campuses. We want you on these campuses. We're going to support and nurture you. So you get the visa, you're legally allowed to be there. And then really it's about where you're choosing to spend your time, which is going to be on these campuses where, of course, we celebrate Diwali, we celebrate Holi, we build this community between domestic students and international students that is sharing and building intercultural competence. And we think about that as outside of the classroom learning. And so when you come to an academic institution, this is about welcoming all. So you get the visa, that's the open door to the country, where you choose to spend your time. And that's where you need to think about what are these institutions that are best fit for me and for my family, has the right program, and also career development opportunities and pathways to PR or green cards or visas that allow you to work. And that's going to depend on the institution you choose as well.
So if I may ask you one small question, which is not part of this question. If USA versus Canada and the popularity of Indian talent in these countries. Where is Indian talent more welcome, is more, accepted between these two?
We're seeing a shift in Canada away from visas being given to international students. Simply,
No, I'm talking specifically about Indian students. America has been specifically very, very accepting towards and welcoming towards Indian students. Of course, Indians are very intelligent, that I get. So, between Canada and America, which country is more, who is more accepting, who is more welcoming towards Indian?
based on visa, right now will be the USA. Canadians' policies towards, and when I say international students, of course, Indian students are part of that. So Indian students for your purposes, there has been a significant change in policy around the giving of visas. The US, although there might be some concerns about that right now, is still very much giving visas to students who are able to meet the qualifications. So I would say the US, I'm clearly a US college president. I'm also a Canadian citizen, so I can understand on both sides.
Yes, that's why I am asking you questions which, which compare these two.
Yeah. So I would say right now the US is a better bet. It's more likely that you are going to get the visa at this point and jobs at the end.
There are many student visas which have been revoked for technical reasons, like say overspeeding, for college campus protests, or somebody not even participating, but also maybe some social media post, some overspeeding. So with all these things happening in the US, what would be your advice to Indian families who are looking forward to sending their kids to the US? Is it too risky at the moment? Should they wait out for a while?
I don't think so. I think when, there was those articles that were published several weeks ago that had said hundreds of Indian students have had their visas revoked. And just to put that into context, it's like 0.02% of the Indian students who are studying in the US. And yes, some of them, there were crimes that were committed. Some of them seemed as though that was very minimal. And so I don't know the extent. You don't know fully on each side, right, exactly what has happened. But what we do know is that
a simple social media post can, invite revocation of visas now. That's the feeling that we have here.
That's a feeling, sure. And I think you really have to dig down to understand, was there more? Was there more to it? And we don't know the case on either side, certainly. But what we've seen is that these visas, for the most part, were actually put back in place. So obviously some miscommunication, some revocations were done without really looking into the full picture. And so I do believe it's a safe space. I do believe choosing a college or university that, you can have access to an immigration expert, like you do at Wesleyan College, at my institution, who can able to advise you should a message come through that your visa is in question. And like I said, business as usual. You're there legally and you need to work a process, the judicial process, and the judicial process is working.
You have seen the US education evolving. So compared to 5 years ago, how has the student experience changed for international students, especially those from India?
I think that the expectation really is about outside of the classroom experiences being more fulsome. The expectation that you need to be having paid work experiences, you need to be giving mentorship opportunities outside of the classroom. I think 5 years ago it was check the box, get the degree. Now, if you're spending all of this money to study abroad, you need to create those pathways into workforce and workforce development.
Right.
And so that expectation on student engagement, student life, leadership opportunities, growth opportunities, that is, in fact, the expectation now of parents and students, and what we're all competing with. We've all cranked up our career development departments, paid internship opportunities, both on campus and off, and student engagement and leadership opportunities. So I think that's now become the general expectation. Those are table stakes now.
Apart from the legal status of immigration and academics, students are now being judged on various parameters in the US. Their political inclination, their freedom of speech, on all of that. So what would be your advice to international students, including Indians, of course, to navigate this volatile landscape?
I think when you're a guest in a country, just as I'm a guest in your country right now, you make certain choices about things that you might say, about governments, things that you might wear. I might dress differently than I do here, than I do in Canada or the US. I might speak differently, who knows? And I think you have to be aware that is that building that cultural competence, that when you're in somebody else's country, that there might be different expectations of you and that you need to be responsive to an evolving landscape. So being aware of what is happening and being sensitive to that, of course, just as, I wouldn't walk on a dark street at 2:00 in the morning in certain cities.
Right.
I don't think I would post certain things about governments right now. And yes, it is freedom of speech, but you're still a guest in somebody's country. And I think at times you need to be mindful of that. And as a Canadian working in the US, I do the same thing.
So many Indian students are walking into debt traps, because they're chasing, fame and brand name schools. What's your take on ROI, and how should Indian students fit, do the trade-off between fit versus fame?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because I call it the sweatshirt syndrome. Everybody is chasing the brand name across their sweatshirt versus fit. And institutions like mine, smaller institutions that are about fit, right? In nurturing your individual gifts, building your skills, building your competencies, look at schools like that. Consider small schools that are going to make sure that you have paid internships, mentorship opportunities, small classrooms where you can figure out, raise your hand, raise your voice. Particularly, my institution is a women's college, particularly for young women or those who identify. And so for our institution, it really is about building that skills and that capacity. When you go to your master's, maybe think about the big resource-rich institutions. The other thing is scholarships. We give incredibly generous scholarships from people who come from nothing. I mean, a big part of international recruitment has to be that you can't just take the affluent kids out. You have to give something back. So we partner with all sorts of nonprofits and NGOs and schools that identify those really smart young people who otherwise could never think about studying abroad, and we give full ride scholarships, including a ticket to the US. And so there are institutions who are doing that, and you're not going to have to go into significant debt to be able to afford that. So, it really is about creating your network, creating mentorship, workforce opportunities, and not just the name. Because a lot of times with the name, you're going to be in a classroom with 400 students, passive receptacle for information, where it says park and bark lecture. And that's not formative. It's not developing you as an individual. It's not developing you as a student. So thinking about fit, I think, is critical, especially as an Indian student who's being away from home for the first time, right, or maybe it was very, very structured, right? Every minute was maybe accounted for. And so coming to college, you want to be in a place where we know if you're not showing up for class, or maybe there's a challenge that you're having, we're going to knock on your door and say, are you okay? And I think that...
Oh, that's impressive.
Oh, of course, because that's what small communities do, right? We know if you're there. We know if you've shown up.
The bonding is the bonding is more tight in a small community.
Oh, certainly. And that gives parents a lot of comfort, particularly right now. So if we know that a student isn't coming out to take meals with their friends or participating in outside of the classroom experiences, or all of a sudden maybe their work has slipped off a bit, we're going to go proactively and check in and care for that individual. Because, we know that when you land in a different country, my gosh, there's so many things that is happening for that person, where a lot of pressures. So how do we ease those, and how do we support that transition?
That's very reassuring to hear, Good to hear that. So talking about financial aid, what are the most overlooked institutional grants that Indian students, or maybe international students for that matter, they overlook and they must explore?
It's amazing how much money is left on the table every single year with scholarships, because the students don't want to write a 500-word essay, or don't want to, because we have an endowment, right? So those are donations that have been given by donors and have created terms where you can access that money. And maybe that you have to write an essay or you do an interview. And it always amazes me how many times students either don't know about them, and they're publicized on our website, or you can go and speak to financial aid, that money is just left on the table that they can in fact get. So go investigate and go and sit with somebody, especially in small schools where somebody will sit with you and say, here's my budget, I have a gap, how do we fill that gap? The other thing is, there is always opportunities to work on campus and fill the gap through workforce as well.
Right, working on campus is still okay.
Of course.
No, there have been many, instances where people were not working on campus; they were working elsewhere also. But they had to quit those jobs. So the legalities around working off campus, are they also changing?
They have to be tied to credit. right? They have to be tied to your program. And so once again, I'm going to harp on small schools because of course that's what I run and I love them, is the fact that when you have a smaller institution, you can do that matchmaking. We know what your program is and we can ensure that that off-campus work experience is going to make sure that it's in line with your visa requirements, because as soon as you step out of that, you are in a fragile place.
Right.
So working with institutions who have that knowledge and can do those placements to make sure that you're satisfying the requirements of your visa are critical. The on-campus part for me, particularly for Indian students, and this is where we prioritize Indian students on this, is that we know that culturally you don't work during high school, right? So you come to college and all these domestic kids who've been working for 5 or 6 years, they have a resume, they have relationships, they have people who are going to give them references. Right. Our Indian students don't. So our Indian students are actually prioritized for our on-campus jobs where they can learn how to fail fast and in an environment that's safe because it's with us. So maybe they don't show up on time, or maybe they're not dressed appropriately, or maybe they don't finish a project or a task that we've given them from an employer perspective within the deadline. We can give them that feedback. And now all of a sudden they have job experience, they have references, and they have this ability to understand what is going to be expected of them when they are transferred into our community.
The larger workforce.
That's correct.
Yeah. Wesleyan has a strong legacy in empowering women. Do you think single-gender liberal arts colleges are misunderstood in India?
No, I think they're very understood in India. It's interesting, right? Because some of the most prestigious institutions are single gender in India, right? Lady Shriram College, you see
LSR,
LSR, Miranda House. There's in the convent of Jesus and Mary are all high quality institutions. I think that if you had a young woman get acceptance to LSR, it'd be absolutely no problem. But then when you think about going abroad, that's when sometimes you have these questions, which if you've got a daughter and you have any concerns, sending them to single gender, I mean, safer environment, certainly. We're nurturing their individual gifts, but I always talk about accelerating equality for women, which means more women in leadership and around leadership tables. Absolutely. And so if you have an institution that all day is focused, everybody wakes up every day to remove barriers to your leadership track, I mean, we're intentionally focused on removing barriers, that's where I think your daughter is going to want to go, particularly in a time where we're seeing a walk back in some of these, these areas of focus in women in leadership.
So let's talk about post-study work in the US. Are US colleges doing enough to help international students transition into OPT, internships or jobs? Or do you think it's still a sink or swim situation?
Depends on the school. It absolutely depends on the school once again. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Small schools, because of capacity, are going to be able to help. So for instance, at Wesleyan, we know that there's a shortage of teachers and nurses, certainly. And so we know that hospitals and school boards are looking for talent. So transitioning from a student visa to an H-1B or work visa, when you're filling a gap in the market, nurses, teachers, that's a great area of focus, right? And we're having hospitals come to us and say, how do we underwrite these visas and get this talent into our hospitals and into our schools? So looking at where there's gaps in workforce, I think that's a great way to start to ensure. But also finding small schools where they're partnering and creating pathways into workforce with these paid internships is going to be really important. If it's a big school, just capacity, they can't do it. So it is more of a sink or swim, certainly, the who you know. But if you're with an institution that is intentionally developing your network, mentorship, references, resume, your interview skills, all of those types of things, your chances are certainly going to be higher because you have that intentionality.
Tell us a little more about Wesleyan. What is the core mission and the vision of Wesleyan?
So accelerating equality for women. And so, for instance, we have a CEO Institute, Creating Equal Opportunities, which is a personal board of directors for every single student who comes in. Peer mentor, academic mentor, industry mentor, and alum mentor. We're leaving nothing to chance. If there's more CEOs named John than there are female CEOs. It's insane, right? Only 20% of Fortune 500 companies are run by women. So we have to ensure that we're very intentional about removing all of those barriers. And we used to talk about this glass ceiling, right? You could maybe see the top, but you can never get there. But now we're talking about broken rung. Think about the rungs of a ladder. We're seeing this mass exodus of women out of middle management positions, and they're leaving. The talent is leaving the workforce. So how do we ensure that there is this network, this support system that is going to catch these women and ensure that they're coming up? Because all of the work that we've done getting women to the top, if that leaky pipeline continues, there won't be progress upwards. Absolutely. So that's what we do. is we remove those barriers, we support them, we give them a great high quality experience in the classroom, but then high touch experiences outside of the classroom that are building all of the skills, negotiation skills, boardroom skills, the ability to storytell. I mean, you of all people would know that better than anybody, right? It's being able to tell a story and to articulate yourself and to get people to want to work with you and buy into you and invest in you. It's how you get the job, how you get the investment, it's how you get a partner. Those things sometimes are undervalued, especially at big schools. So, and particularly for women. So building confidence so that no matter what table, boardroom table, operating table, and everywhere in between, you're going to come with confidence and look like you've been there before.
Thanks a lot for sharing your insights and inputs today.
Thank you for having me.
And one last question. If we were to share 5 tips for anyone wanting to study abroad, not abroad only, study in the US, what would those 5 pieces of wisdom be?
Yeah. Go to a small school for your undergrad, certainly.
Okay, number 1.
Ask the right questions. Interview them just as much as they interview you. It's a big decision and it's a big investment. Look at fit over sweatshirt syndrome, right? Make sure that there is intentionality around developing you as a person and that you won't just be a number, right? And find a place that is going to think about after your undergrad. Use it as a launch pad. So whether that is mentorship opportunities, internship opportunities, but really this is your chance to develop that network and that group of people that will vouch for you and say your name in rooms that matter. Make sure that school is thinking about that as well.
Thanks a lot again for giving us your valuable time. We look forward to many more such conversations with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.